So my guest for today's show is a very talented young lady. We've obviously adopted her here in Bradford, even though she's not from the city. She is a total champion, has won several accolades and awards, is regularly visited and meeting members of the royal family. I'm going to take great pleasure in announcing my wonderful guest on our couch today, and that is Sophia Bunsey. Hi, Sophia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's nice to see you in person.
I know it is, isn't it?
It's been ages. It's actually been ages. I think I see you pop up on social media, but even though you're not far from where we are at the Kidmont Centre, I haven't seen you physically.
Well, we were meeting during lockdown, weren't we? When the lockdown one happened, when you were doing all that amazing work, doing all the food parcels for those people who were isolating, and lots of other things as well from that centre. So you've really not stopped working since lockdown began, have you?
Yeah, no, March. We were back out in March, and I guess that's probably the role of a community development worker, isn't it? Yeah. Regardless of the risk, regardless of what's involved, if there's a community need, you get yourself out there. So I know a lot of people have said, I've been stuck at home and I just want to get back out to work, and I just think, oh, it's exhausting. We haven't stopped since March.
Yeah.
So really been frontline in it.
Yeah.
And then as measures have changed, and there's just been, it's trying to keep up with all the new ways of working and who you are allowed to see, who you aren't allowed to see. So yeah, it's just been as tumultuous.
And
for
I'm
everybody.
so glad that we're allowed to see each other today.
I know.
Especially because you technically are in my bubble, because we were meeting initially. I think it's just these last 2 months we've not sort of met in person. And that's obviously been because we've been very busy, as you can see.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
our new studio.
It's wonderful. I'm like, wow, I feel so honoured. I'm one of the first people that's got to see this, and
you are blessing my studio, Sophia, today. So
well, I hope to bring you lots of good luck and many brilliant interviews after this.
Thank you. We need to hide a 4-leaf clover in there
somewhere there. Yeah. Or I'll put me a penny in there somewhere before I leave for good luck.
Please do. So, Sophia, I've been your friend for a long time, but you do so many things. You get involved in so many things within the community, so many things outside of the community. One minute I'm seeing you with Princess Anne, then I'm seeing you with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, then I'm seeing you deliver food parcels to those who are isolating, and lots of other things. And I regularly see you in our paper as well as in lots of other media. Tell us in detail today, exactly what do you do? What is your role? Because
I really don't know my job description either. So it's anything and everything goes. I started off as a community development worker, Fatima, and I'll always see myself as that. So when you're developing communities, you're absolutely right. You have to dip into everything and anything, and no, it's not in our dictionary. So whatever it takes to move people forward. So initially my career began in youth work. So I was in Huddersfield when I first graduated. I was probably quite lucky because I was working in 2 areas. So I was working in quite a heavily populated South Asian area, but I was also a youth worker in Brighouse, quite the opposite community. I was working for Calderdale Council, largely, a 99% white working class community. So I really was embedded in both communities and looked at some of the dynamics within those when it came to poverty, deprivation, aspirations, and trying to get young people to achieve more and aim higher, as well as access opportunity. So it was a real learning ground for me, and I loved it. Youth work is still in my heart. I absolutely try and get involved in everything I still can, because the energy and the vibrancy that young people bring, or I think if you're lucky enough, fortunate enough to see young people progress and they've gone on to further education or employment, which many of the young people I started off working with have done, it really warms your heart when they come back and say, oh, miss, you played that crucial part, and I remember what you said, and you're still an inspiration. So yeah, a lot of my working life started with young people, soon moved on to women's empowerment, working with women in the community, and at first it was quite a basic level, like engaging with English classes, and then slowly moving them onto other types of classes and saying, look, you don't need to necessarily resort to that stereotype of being a housewife. Have aspirations, move on, and try to challenge yourself and people's perceptions of yourself as well.
But your women's empowerment work has been quite revolutionary, hasn't it? Because you were the very first to work with Muslim women in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of completely led and started that project, didn't you?
Yeah. So myself and Ishtiaq Ahmed, as you know, from the Kidmat Centres, and again, this was the work I was doing in Huddersfield, you know, really embedded within a community and working with the women, began to notice actually some women were involved in criminality, but we didn't know anything about their stories. I definitely didn't. So I'm sat there at grassroots level noticing and hearing whispers as you do in communities. So-and-so's, you know, so-and-so's gone to prison, and you know, her family are not maybe necessarily going to visit her, or we don't know what's happened to her, she's never going to come back. And then you see that disparity between Muslim men going to prison and Muslim women, and the men definitely were getting visits in prison, and actually sometimes they came back and there was a whole party thrown for them and some dole drumming outside and welcome back. But with the women, there was this notion of like silence and invisibility around it. We don't want to talk about that. Just keep it under wraps, keep it under the carpet. And then I remember having this conversation with Ishtiaq, thinking, what's happening with them? You know, we're hearing about cases, and academically, you know, my degree was research as well, behavioural science and research. So he was like, well, why don't we try and find out? You go in, you're multilingual, you'll know the language. And I remember it was a really funny story when I tell people, and it was just a thought. In community development work, a lot just stems from a seed of thought. And if you follow through, the projects can be so amazing what you come up with. And I remember him saying, well, yeah, just go in and find out then. And I was like, I was probably quite naive at the time, and I was like, yeah, all right, I will do. Sent a fax over to the local prisons, HMP Newhall. A fax.
That word for ages.
Because then we were like, security, they're not going to pick up our emails. If we call, they're going to be like, who are you? And put the phone down. Like, the governor doesn't want to talk to you. Who are you? Just put the phone down. And we were like, yes, we shall go official. We'll send a fax. And it was a really snowy December day. I'll never forget it. Put a fax over just saying, I'd like to research around Muslim women prisoners and why they're there. And I thought, nobody's going to respond to this. Nobody really cares. It's just going to go in the bin, isn't it? And actually, we got something back saying, well, the governor says that if you'd like to come in and have a chat about this, we're certainly up for listening. Absolutely amazing. And by that small step, huge things happened post that. And then it came to reality and fruition that, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go work in a prison, and I don't know what goes on in there, and I don't know the dynamics or how it works, and I have to go in on my own.
What was your first day like visiting? Because obviously it can be, like you said, daunting. Yeah. It's a world you've never visited. What was it like? Can you remember?
It was obviously, there is that sense of there's a clear demarcation and distinction between this world on the outside and that world on the inside, and the fact that I was just like, oh gosh, I must make sure I don't breach any security, because it was things like you can't take in a mobile phone, you know, certain items of you know, food you can't take in, you know, things that are wrapped in tin foil, for example. The tin foil can be used for other things. Make sure you don't have anything on your persons that might, you know, contravene the regulations there. So it was quite scary, because it was like, well, this is a world that we're in. There's a population of Muslim women in there that reside in a much bigger population of women from across different ethnic groups. And it's your job to build a relationship with them and go and somehow try to listen to their stories and build trust with them in order to paint a picture of what's going on. And that's quite scary, because it's not as simple as me walking out of this room to go into the kitchen. Actually, every time you move, somebody needs to know why you've moved. Every door needs to be unlocked. So I remember in the very beginning, I didn't have keys to be able to unlock doors, to go and see people in their cells, to even get myself to the chapel. So I had to be escorted by somebody. And, you know, sometimes you get that sense of, oh gosh, I'm putting people out here. I'm trying to tell them I need to get from this station to this station. Please, can you? So there was that feeling of being babysat a little bit and putting people out, and you're the woman that's coming to talk about equality, and maybe that's not everybody's agenda, you know. And so there was a lot of, wow, these are going to be huge boots to fill. I'm going to have to get everybody onto the same page. I engage that level of interest in this subject matter, but it is a totally invisible subject matter. And, you know, there was no information about it, unfortunately, not in academia, not in any women's organisations, and not even from the community. So how do you work around invisibility? And that was a mammoth task.
You were technically going into a completely unknown zone, as you said.
Yeah.
But also looking at supporting Muslim women who are in prison.
Yeah.
So naturally, obviously, society, especially within the communities that we come from, have probably already judged them and put them into a space where they have probably been taken out of the society or taken out of families. Did you not feel any risk to yourself? Because you could be putting yourself into danger by agreeing to work with, because obviously there's two sides to it, isn't there? Agreeing to work with that person who's in for a reason, but then also the people on the outside who are connected to that person, but obviously have had to break off, or like you said earlier, to completely ignore their being because of the fact that they're in prison.
There was trepidation. There was a sense of, this is not a sympathetic cause. It's not going to be easy. And a sense of actually sometimes people saying, why? There's so many other causes you could be working on. Why this? And why are you perhaps deciding to do our dirty laundry in public? You know, there's things that have gone on. They don't the drivers to those women and their incarceration don't deserve to be looked at. They've done a bad thing. Leave them there. Why are you so interested in telling the story? And that was really troubling in a sense, because I think from a faith perspective, obviously, you know, we're told to support those that are in vulnerable positions, in some sense mental turmoil, lonely, isolated. But that was more of the cultural narrative that was playing out. And then it just meant being very clever and savvy in how the project was packaged, and hence my co-writer is a male, because we needed community ownership. And Ishtiaq Bhai had done so much when it came to race equality. He's quite embedded within the mosques because he's an advisor there. So it was a bit like, well, yeah, I do want that sense of protection as well as somebody that understands the community dynamics and has got over 35 years of experience of dealing with really difficult issues, because this is a really difficult issue. It's not going to be one that we as a community will digest easily, and it certainly won't be one that the CGS has had on their radar or know a lot about, you know. So there was that, and I remember talking to my mum about it, and she was saying that, Sophia, could you just not find anything else to do? I didn't understand youth work as it was, Sophia. You know, she never understood the concept of youth work. And my mum's so funny. She used to say, I bet you go to the youth centre and play kabaddi with the children and come back home. Mum, I don't.
Even I'm beginning to agree with her, do you?
And I was like, Mum, I really don't. And maybe that's her version of when in communities you get all these youth workers just play pool and they go home. And I was like, no, Mum, we do voice and influence stuff. And, you know, we'd taken young people across to Spain. We'd looked at, you know, how the Muslim wars had ruled there. We'd been across to Italy on racism in Italian sport. We were really represented in our youth group. And my mum was like, no, you play kabaddi and you come home. Like, have you finished? Is that your hard life? And I was like, Mum. And so when prisons came along, she was really like, oh gosh, Sophia, what will people say? And so that whole, I guess sometimes that narrative's embedded in our parents as well. What will people say? And you're trying to do something that's challenging and different, and, you know, what impact will that have on you and how you're perceived in the community as well? And as a mother, obviously, she was really protective, not just about my dignity, but how I project, and also my safety while I was in there. Because people, I don't know, maybe people watch, too many Prisoner Cell Block H and, you know, Orange is the New Black, and they're like, oh, wow, what is it like in there?
And it's not like that
it's
at all,
not like
is it?
That. No, it's not like that at all. Obviously, you have to be aware, and we have to work within, that awareness of security, but it's not like that at all. Really. So yeah, there was that whole, I really have to weigh this up, because if it goes wrong, it could really go wrong. And that would tarnish, you know, not just my reputation forever, but the whole subject matter.
Yeah.
So, but there was a lot of personal risk, yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever get any backlash off anybody? Have you ever experienced being cornered, so to speak, in
I've had some, it's just mild conversations around, you know, did we really have to talk about this? In the very beginning, did we really have to talk about? I mean, the project's at a stage now where it's absolutely a sector leader. But in the beginning, there was, did we really have to talk about this? I've had questions from the other side of, well, if they're Muslim women, what they're doing in prison. So that whole, you know, tainting of faith and questioning of faith. So yeah, but the reason, once again, brought it back to Muslim women in prison was maybe to bring our community back to the faith values and say they're Muslim women in prison, but can we look at giving second chances, and can we stop this really complex interplay of like culture and faith and expectations and sometimes politics playing out for these women? Can we just see it for what it is and produce some solutions? It's not just about talking about it, because we were never there to sensationalize it. I've never sensationalized the subject matter. If I told you the number of approaches I get from you know, for interviews and you know, on national television platforms, and we're not there for that. We're there to keep the community's dignity, really, and to provide structured support for these women.
Yeah.
It's not something that needs to be aired out there at all.
And you really have, haven't you? I mean, you've really like kept to the project. You've not, like you said, gone out there and made it a big media thing. You really sort of worked on the project to help these women, because obviously I see what other people don't, having the good fortune of living near where you work. And as a result of that, you've won so many awards for it. I mean, the Asian Woman of Achievement Awards. And then I remember we did a story on you receiving an award from Princess Anne.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of are more or less, you know, it's a regular for you, isn't it, to be with a royalty, with a royal member of the family. But also another recent one, which is why we were really originally going to do this interview, based on the recent award that you've got. So tell our viewers a bit more about the recent award that you won.
So the recent award was from the Howard League, which is one of the oldest penal reform charities in the UK, actually, and they were set up as far back as 1866.
Wow.
So they work really closely with Parliament on policy change, on advocating for prisoners, really making communities safer and having less people go into prison. So their base is in London, and so you can tell it was...
So it's a really big deal.
A huge
getting
deal,
that
absolutely.
Award, and to bring that, you know, to our region.
Yeah.
It's massive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How do you feel? How do you feel when you get these kind of accolades and awards?
Do you know, for me personally, Fatima, it's not even about me. It's about the issue and the subject. And as soon as that, Sophia Bunsey might just be the person fronting it.
Yeah.
But guess what? Somebody needed to stand with the women. Somebody needed to consistently stand with the women, because a lot of the women were saying, well, it's either men that talk on our behalf, or if it's not men, it's women from other ethnic backgrounds that are talking on our behalf. We need a Muslim woman to stand with us that is quite neutral to all of this, that in some ways, some of the clients have said that hasn't been incarcerated herself, because they feel like even when they speak through their, you know, user voice and influence group, sometimes they do have that sense of, you know, we are being second guessed and questioned, because people are bound to say we'd say this because we're ex-prisoners, you know. So they needed somebody from the community consistently stand with them and be like, look, we're with you, we're trying to understand this subject area, we're trying to produce solutions, and we will be that sort of caveat just in case there is any backlash. So I'm really proud for Bradford, for Huddersfield when it started. You know, and little old Bradford at the top of the country is getting these awards from a really, you know, London-centric organisations that are like, well, there's something going on up north, and they seem to be,
and this is one of the reasons,
doing all right.
This is one of the reasons why we adopt you, because obviously, you know, you're not from Bradford, but the amount of work that you do for the city and putting Bradford literally on the map with the accolades that you're bringing and the awards that you're winning, it's absolutely amazing. What made you want to work in Bradford, and how do you be so passionate about a city that you don't live in?
Well, I think it's just fate and destiny takes you there, doesn't it? So I've done a lot of work, as I've said, and I've always been a bit of a traveller with my career. I think a lot of people don't know this about me, but I had a very, you know, in-depth career in other parts of West Yorkshire before I came here. So I was working in Huddersfield many years and Brighouse. You know, worked at Calderdale College for a couple of years. I even worked for a UK-based NGO in Nottingham, and that's where I got to do a lot of international aid work as well. So I was out in Somalia, I was out in different countries doing that. So eventually, I'll be honest with you, it was a prison work that brought me to Bradford. So having written 2 major reports alongside Ishtiaq on Muslim women prisoners and what was going on with them, we were thinking at that point, you know, somebody's going to pick up what we're saying. Somebody's going to pick up that there's invisibility of these women in the system. They need support. We need representation in prisons, because unfortunately there isn't. There's a statistic that says like 93% plus of officers are white working class officers in prisons. You know, so that representation of those women in there, for example, do they ever get to see a Muslim female officer? Do they ever get to see a black female officer? Anybody from a minority background that they could relate to? And, you know, the report that David Lammy did 2 years ago on disproportional sentencing, which again you covered, shows that actually there's many disparities in the CGS. So I guess I kind of got cornered at the time, because it was like, nobody's really there yet in the CGS. Communities definitely aren't there yet. It's such a complex issue to understand. Somebody needs to build a re-entry model in a place where, you know, there's a lot of, I guess, will for it, but there's also women coming back to the community, and that place just happened to be Bradford and the Kidmat Centres. You know, a really robust operation that is open 7 days a week, delivers multiple services, and had many of the dynamics that we required to form a re-entry hub. You know, the advice workers were in place, there's lots of room at the centre. The management committee and the management had the will to say, okay, we'll let you trial this, we'll let you trial a re-entry hub here, and we're willing to take any of the consequences that might come with that. So once again, yeah, it was a prison work that brought me there, but as I came along, so did Sophia and Sophia's values of community development, and I love to help wherever I can. I love to get stuck in, and I'm very hands-on. So a lot of my work with, whether that's young people, interfaith, charity work, it all came along with me.
Wonderful. Now, you barely just got over winning the Howard Award.
Yeah.
And you've had another bit of good news.
Yes.
And this is amazing again, once again, for the city and for Muslim women as well, because you're one of 5 and the only woman of BAME background to have been recently appointed, and I'm sure people probably already know this, but for those who don't, Sophia's just been appointed as a Deputy Lieutenant for West Yorkshire. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
So what does a Deputy Lieutenant do?
You know, everyone asks this, what does a Deputy Lieutenant do? Everybody asks this,
uniform?
where's the uniform and the role? Well, it's a, you know, it is a really unexpected surprise, and it's a huge honour and privilege. So the Deputy Lord Lieutenant's roles are to support the Lord Lieutenant, Ed Anderson, and that's on his, you know, representing royalty and the royal duties in the area. So really a lot of the civic ceremonies that he takes part in, so it's Remembrance Day soon, and I know Ed's doing something for that. He's often invited to represent the royal family at functions, fundraisers, schools, certification evenings, or even induction of some of the vicars. So in Ed's absence, sometimes the deputy lieutenants are called on to go and represent the royal family there. So yeah, it's quite a privileged position. So it's one of representation, because obviously Her Royal Highness can't be everywhere. So each area has its representatives, its lieutenants and its deputies to, you know, I guess grace the ceremonies, say a few words, and really support communities and show that interest towards, you know, civic life and what's going on within communities.
Oh, well done, congratulations. And I can't think of anyone better than you, Sophia, to have that role, especially because you've had a lot of interactions with the royal family, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've obviously been given an award by
Yes.
Princess Anne, and more recently you had the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. What was that like?
That was
Meeting
pressure.
them and pressure.
Yeah, it was pressure. As in,
How
like,
is it pressure?
Kidmat centres need to, like, you know, because Kidmat centres were the community host
Yeah.
for the royal visit in January. You know, the Duke and Duchess were coming, and it was, you know, as these things are, it's always a touch and go. And that was actually the first point where I did meet the Lord Lieutenant's office and the deputies, where, you know, part of their role is helping to make those arrangements and making sure everything goes smoothly, and there aren't any hiccups and everything's presented well. So that was when I first met the office, but it was, I guess, myself and Ishtiaq took a lead role in that. And the pressure of them coming to Bradford and you doing Bradford the best service that you can, and having a celebration within, you know, within the realms of security, and being able to, you know, engage communities to show their love and respect and regard for the royals was like, that was immense. So you probably saw like the dole drummers that we had, and young children, you know, from Grange and Horton School, and drum, you know, sort of with the flags outside and the big royal cake, and absolutely, it was like,
But there was a lot of work that went on before to get all that.
Yeah.
I remember coming the night before
Yes.
when you were prepping.
Yeah.
The red carpet was being laid out.
Yeah.
The, you know, bunting was going up, and everybody's, you know, little stands and spaces were all being put out, and you were literally having sleepless nights.
Yeah, because it's about involving it. But for us, it wasn't just about the centre. It was, how do you take that community along with you, and how do you give the community that sense of participation and pride, and being able to, you know, this is a memory that's going to stay, especially with the young people from the neighbouring schools. It's a memory that's going to stay with them for years and years. It's hopefully something that's going to inspire them in the future as well. But for communities to believe that, oh, do you know, we're good enough to receive this visit, we want to rejoice in this, and we want to play an active role in this. So it wasn't just about a centre, it was about taking a community along on the journey, doing that community and the city service, so as somebody that doesn't live in Bradford. But I think that's good for me as well, especially with the new DL appointment as well. So that sort of, I'm sure that factored in part of it, the fact that, you know, I'm spread across
West Yorkshire.
Yeah, West Yorkshire. So I've been involved with quite a few communities, and I have that, you know. So I'm not biased when it comes to Bradford or my own hometown. But it really did. I did have that sense of, gosh, I really have to do Bradford proud, because poor Bradford gets a lot of bad press at times, doesn't it? There's some amazing things that go on inside Bradford, and there's some wonderful people like yourselves which are really championing the brilliant work that's going on. However, externally, I know when I'm down in London for my meetings, and, you know, you say Bradford and people's eyebrows raise, and oh, Bradford. So we've had those, unfortunately, those reviews in the past, and we've had times where, you know, we haven't been done the service we should have been done. So to receive that visit for the city was just, you know, the city was just absolutely bursting with pride, wasn't it? And it was about doing it justice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Justice you did. What I want to know is, what was the first thing you said to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge?
I think I got a handshake and a welcome to Bradford. So on the red carpet, it was just like, and it was so, it was overwhelming, but I was quite aware of what was going on. And what I loved about them was they were just so interactive. They'd gone across to the crowd, separately gone across to the crowds. The Duke and Duchess were shaking people's hands. They were having selfies taken. You know, they were. I remember, you know, Prince William going across to the dole drummers and trying to participate in some of that. And so you could tell they were really enthused and engaged. And I do remember them saying, actually, this is really reminiscent of our visit to Pakistan, because they got that same warm welcome. And if you remember, the summer prior was when they'd gone to Pakistan, and really were taken aback by the culture. And that's what we were trying to do, show them the culture of Bradford and the vibrancy. And yeah, it was, and it probably went like that. The entire day probably went like that. And once they were there, actually, they put us at ease.
Yeah.
They put us at ease, because they were just so human and so personable.
So am I allowed to ask, who's your favourite royal?
No, you can't. don't do that to me, Fatima.
On the spot. Now that you're in DL.
Now that I'm here, now you're trying to trip me up, aren't you? Oh, they've all actually been, every one that I've had the privilege of interacting with, whether it was Princess Anne, you know, again, very knowledgeable, very dignified. And I remember when I did meet her, and she told me about Dama Cheese, a cheesemaker from Huddersfield, a woman that from a refugee background. And she said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Huddersfield." And she says, "Oh, you know, I remember visiting a lady from your town, and she told me about." And I was so, you know, it was so touching to see she'd actually remembered who she'd met, and some of the good practice that was going on in those areas. And, you know, it's those small details that count. You know, you think they have so many engagements that they carry out, and to carry those out with sincerity and have an actual genuine interest. So whoever I've been fortunate enough to meet has actually really touched me in different ways. And you know, they've shown that human side and that care. Because I think sometimes we are quite fearful and we put the royal family on a pinnacle, and you know, where it can be really overwhelming. But I've just had absolutely wonderful experiences. Been extremely fortunate, really, Fatima. I count my blessings, and I always say, to be honest, a lot that I just think a lot of it is just the prayers of the women that I've helped. You know, nobody can. You can't nominate yourself to be put in these positions.
Yeah.
It's not it really is by the will of God, a lot of this. It's not something that, you know, you can twist in your career path. It just happens, and you know, I count all my blessings for that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Congratulations on all your accolades and all your achievements.
Thank
I think you're going to
you.
make an absolutely amazing DL. You never know, we might be inviting you when we're allowed, obviously.
Of course,
To
it would be a
grace
pleasure.
many occasions and hopefully grace this wonderful couch again. But in the meantime, wishing you all the best, Sophia, and thank you so much for being part of our very first series of Let's Talk with Asian Sunday.
Thank you, and best of luck with it. You're not going to need luck, Fatima. I know you're going to be absolutely incredible, but
We
such
need
a
it.
pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks.